sense of ownership over your own space. Now, this is inherently a socialist concept. Okay? Hey, speaking of racism, when do you next plan to patronize Gideon? I honestly think that you were out of your depth on that one. I love that. They're back. We got our guys are back, dude. I love that. Gideon is someone I talk to frequently who literally will sometimes hit me up when he makes videos to be like, hey, what did you think about that? And meanwhile, this guy is still operating on the idea that like I am, I was racist to Gideon or something. Anyway, get better, chatter. I want you to get better. I want you to do better. I want you to get better. I hope you will be happy one day, just like I am. So, that collectivist identity is the underpinning of a lot of Japanese works like One Piece that people often conflate with generic friendship. Yes. So, yeah, Kohei Saito is the person who I want to reach out to talk to. This is the guy. He wrote about, degrowth, degrowth communism. I mean, he's like popping off in Japan because I think Japan is entering an era where the new generation is basically just like looking for things to work, because things, if you are a younger Japanese person, does not work for you in the same way that it did for prior generations. Japan genuinely has a massive problem with the aging population, and they are looking for any solution whatsoever. And that's why you hear kooky ideas like old people should just fucking kill themselves, which is a serious, very popular Japanese Yale economist idea. When you got old people genocide, when you think about old people genocide as like an option, and like the youth are listening to that, well, that's kind of scary. Opinion on 55% inheritance tax is incredible. It's incredible. It is actually good. Degrowth is in cooling down the hyperwork attitude, like you can't / don't work, you useless. No, degrowth is more like we have too many things and we should just focus on things that we need and focus on sharing and not creating new commodities all the fucking time, because it's like destroying the planet, which there is truth to. But I do like useless commodities, so Kohei Saito is one guy. He is the degrowth communist guy. And then the other Yale economist that I was talking about is the other end of that spectrum, who's like, let's just, get all the old people to kill themselves. What is your perspective on their birth rate issues? It's a very common problem for any developed nation. America will have those issues. America is like basically America, if it didn't have a steady flow of immigration into the country, would have that exact same issue. The only reason why America doesn't have the same exact issues with Japan is because immigration. What the fuck? That was scary. People can't afford to have children or are too busy to working to have some. Anyway, I mean, you see with the hyper capitals like South Korea. No, South Korea is more fucked than Japan, for the record, because South Korea is more controlled by the United States than even Japan is. And Japan is incredibly controlled by the United States, obviously. So, like, every issue that Japan currently has, South Korea has tenfold, because they have, like, South Korean income and wealth disparity is higher than the Japanese income and wealth disparity. I'm pretty sure. Hold on, let's look. but they have suicide problems just like Japan does, just like America does. Ironic, but they have even worse anti-communist resentment sentiment. Hold on, let's look at this. Yeah. Household wealth distribution, by the way, which is nothing in comparison to America, by the way, but still. Poverty rates of major economies, which is the income gap. South Korea is at 17.4%. Household wealth distribution in South Korea by wealth decile. In 2022, the top 10% of households in South Korea owned about 43% of total household net worth, while households in lowest wealth owned minus 0.2%. South Korea was the fifth most equal country in the world in 2019. However, economic inequality is growing. According to data from 2010, low-income earners make up 37.8% of South Korea's labor force. Countries with the highest suicide rates, when you look at OECD nations, it's South Korea. Russia is pretty high. America's supposed to be up there. I don't know what the fuck happened. Suicide in Japan places significantly outside the top 10, but suicide is nonetheless a serious concern there. It's leading cause of death in men. Chris next door, thank you for the 3 gifted subs. Allowing 3 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. That's another thing that I forgot to do. At the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. The top 0.1% of wealthy South Koreans made 70 times more than median income earners in 2021. Would you say that this could/will be the future of any nation tied to the U.S.? That is every nation that's tied to the U.S. What are you talking about? That is already every nation that's tied to the United States. What do you mean? South Korea, out of OECD nations, has an insanely high suicide rate. Japan, shockingly, not as high. But the United States is a little bit higher. Which, by the way, I mentioned this and people were like, no, United States suicide rate is not higher. Yes, it is. It is higher than Japan. Look at Norway. Yeah. Chris next door with another 6 gifted. Sakura Gore, Doodleburb, thank you for the 5 gifted. Allowing 19 total people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. I'm going to run the 3-minute ad break now. If you also want to avoid the ads, you can subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime or by getting gifted a sub if you're lucky. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. How is Japan tied to America? I don't know if you know this, brother, but we dropped 2 atomic bombs on them and then wrote their constitution for them. That's actually a really good question that you just asked me. I was talking to Connor about this, but I don't know if you guys know this, but in Japan, for example, during COVID, they shut down immigration, okay? They were like, no one coming into Japan. If you leave Japan and you're a green card holder, if you're a legal permanent resident with family in Japan, okay? If you left Japan during COVID, you were not allowed to see your babies again. If you have half Japanese children and a Japanese wife and you left the country, you were not allowed back. That's how fucking aggro their immigration was. However, internally, they had no way of closing down the businesses. Care to understand why the Japanese Constitution had a clause in it that made it so that the government could not shut down businesses? Because we wrote it, motherfucker. That's why. We wrote it, and we basically fucking said the government can't interfere with businesses. When asked who had the best constitution in the world, Chief Justice Sotomayor said the Japanese constitution because they already had all the shit we fucked up with taken out. That's not even true. Because they kept all the fucking weird, awful shit. Like, the government can't control businesses. Like, that's an insane fucking take. I meant for, like, slavery. Yeah. Chris Nash, thank you for the 10 gift of subs. Anyway, so the Korean chaebol structure was modeled after the Japanese zaibatsu. South Korea's economy grew faster than nearby nations because their labor movement stopped them from taking IMF loans in the 90s. Their greatest strength came from a labor movement they pretend doesn't exist. During the Asian finance crisis of the 90s, South Korea was the only one not to take IMF loans and grew faster than Japan as a result. Japan's economy is still bigger, but South Korea grows faster every year. I mean, I think that's only one component, but South Korea does have a labor movement, but it also has insane levels of income inequality, insane levels of wealth disparity, and a hyper centralized a group of wealth that basically control their entire economy, but hyper centralized around a capitalist perspective and not necessarily one that benefits the people in general. So, but one benefit that really good chapter in History of Neoliberalism by David Harvey on that IMF loan thing. They still crazy capitalists. One thing that South Korea has, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is fucking North Korea. Okay? Now, that, of course, builds a lot of resentment towards North Korea. But when you have literal family members, or when you have, like, you're not that far removed from a country that at least, like, considers itself to be aligned with socialist nations, okay, which was doing significantly better before the dissolution of the USSR, by the way. North Korea wasn't as bad as we understand it. And it's actually doing a lot better now than it used to in like the 90s or in the immediate aftermath of the USSR imploding. Okay? It's doing significantly better now, despite being completely fucked over, okay, by the United States time and time again. Having having such a close neighbor that is associated with like the socialist modes of governance is a legitimate threat. It constitutes a legitimate threat for capitalist nations, which is why they oftentimes will implement some social democratic principles in an effort not to allow the population to get so angry that they go full commie. This is also the very reductive way of understanding. Sometimes people ask me, like, why did European social democracies exist? Whereas for some weird reason, social democracies were not allowed to work in Latin American countries. Well, part of that is also because other than like a lack of American interference in Europe, trade unionists and social democratic movements were allowed to continue because their governments considered the USSR to be too serious of a threat. Does that make sense? It's not just because they're white, Lamau. I talked about this already. Yes, that's a big part of it. But you also have to remember, fucking remember that a legitimate reason for it was because they were too afraid of the USSR's influence on labor movements in Western Europe. So they were like, okay, we'll give you something. It's basically like the ratchet effect, but in reverse. Do you understand? In America, we move closer and closer towards fascism every fucking day because you just have like everyone is too afraid of the attitudes that people have, the fascist attitudes that people have. So the Democratic Party is like, okay, we got to concede to the right. Okay, we got to concede to the right. Okay, we got to concede to the right. They were kind of doing that with leftist, kind of like the New Deal. Exactly. It's like an international Western European New Deal style governance because they were genuinely afraid. Just like in the New Deal era, FDR was afraid of trade unionists and socialists becoming a viable movement that would completely undermine American neoliberal mechanisms of control. They did not want capitalist control to go away. They recognized that income inequality was at an unimaginable level, so they had to make a social democratic compromise. This is precisely what they did in Western Europe. This is kind of the reason why South Korea has some of these amenities as well, even though it goes away as the economy grows, as they become a more global, prominent force. And, you see stuff like this as a consequence of that. It's not great. It's really, really bad, as a matter of fact. So, but going back to Japan, when we were talking about Japan, it's not supposed to work. It's not supposed to work. It's not supposed to work. It's hyper capitalist. Everything is supposed to just like fucking fall apart. Can you like like Shinkansen, right? When you talk about like bullet trains, there's like JR Rail and numerous other companies that run, private companies that run their railways there, okay? In America, if we had our localized rail systems that privatized, they'd be fucking hitting each other every day. There'd be head-on collisions every fucking day, okay? Well, luckily, we don't even have that kind of rail system for public transit inside of cities anyway. But like, the reason why that works is because there's like a level of control by the government. And like I said, there's like some collectivist understanding, I guess, that people are bound by responsibility, bound by improving their own living quarters and improving the existence for everyone, for everyone else. Collectivism in Japan has more to do with feudal traditions than socialism. Yes, it predates socialism. Yes, I 100% understand. Japan is not a socialist country. I mean, they've had labor movements in the past and stuff, but Japan has never been a socialist country. I don't think that at all. That's why I'm saying it's like thousands of years of tradition that predate like the Industrial Revolution, that predate the Meiji Restoration. It is certainly a prominent force that is like unbending and unyielding to the corrosive influence of Western hegemonic neoliberal capitalism somehow. Not to be a nerd, but I think this is significant. That is particularly not a materialist analysis of Japan. No, I think there's still historical materialism. I just am unfamiliar with Japanese modes of production, but I'm sure that it has everything to do with like the way that they fucking made rice or some shit. I don't know, but there is nothing that you can always make a historical materialist analysis. I just don't know enough about Japan's history, but I'm sure that there is a production mode that played a role in this kind of attitude being built. I'm sure that actually, you know what? I'll go so far as to say I'm sure that it has something to do with it being a fucking island nation. So, you got natural resources, but that probably causes you to have almost a Jusha-like understanding of self-reliance. Anyway. So, we also bankrolled Japan's comeback so they were allowed to thrive more in a capitalist sense. Yes, we've always done that. You earlier mentioned how we as Americans don't have collectivism like the Japanese do, where they clean the streets as individuals. You clearly have not seen this. I need your help next time you see Feastables in Walmart and soon to be new retailers. If you could clean up the presentation and make it look better, that may make me very happy. I'm building a team to do this routinely. Just need help in the short term. Yeah, there you go, dude. What do you mean? That's collectivism right there. Mr. Beast just wants Japanese style cleanliness and perfection. And you guys are haters and you don't understand, okay? Get fucked, everybody.